Phillies TV voice Tom McCarthy does it all. Play-by-play for baseball, the NFL, college basketball. He even tries to fix toilets. You see, while broadcasting in the minor leagues for the Trenton Thunder, McCarthy also had some assistant GM responsibilities that included fixing a ballpark toilet.
I'm like 340 pounds at this time, and I am dripping sweat. And I'm fixing this toilet. And Andy Freed is on the air, and he said, "We go to the top of the fourth inning here at Waterfront Park. Tom McCarthy's supposed to be doing play-by-play, but I have no idea where he is."
Tom McCarthy is actually here, joining us on this next edition of Fresh 24. Tom McCarthy, 24 seasons as a big league announcer, 17 announcing the Phillies. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong with any of these stats here. You do NFL. Do you still do college basketball? I think you do.
I do, yeah.
Basically, you have no life. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Father of four, including Pat, who announces for the Mets. Tommy, who at last glance was playing in the minor leagues. We'll get an update on that, I'm sure. And certainly your greatest achievement ever in your life, and I know you have a great family and you've done many great things, announcing in center field and catching a home run ball while calling the shot. Come on, Tom. Unbelievable. We'll get into all of it and more. Tom McCarthy, welcome to Fresh 24.
Thank you, Zoo. I appreciate it, buddy. It's nice to be with you. It's nice to be able to compare haircuts here. It's nice.
Right. Together we don't make a full head of hair. All right. It happened 10 years ago last June. For those of you interested, it's all over social. It's on YouTube. You and the broadcast team, at least for the game anyway, you're stationed in center field. You not only called the home run, you caught the home run. You had a glove. Anybody else in baseball ever do that?
I think foul balls have been caught before, Zoo. In fact, I think my son caught one in the minor leagues one time, but nothing like that. This was like a total chance. You know, we were out in center field for the week leading up to that, myself and Jeff Halleckman, our producer, and we were gauging whether a ball would be out there because it was the first time we had done this broadcasting from the stands, and he so wanted a ball to come out there. But we knew we were a pretty good distance, and we were out there. There was nothing. There was no batting practice, home runs. There was nothing that was going out there. And he just said to me, he said, "Hey, listen, just make sure somebody has a glove." And I think he really meant either Jamie or Matt. I don't think he really meant me. But I always had a bucket of balls and my glove in my truck because my one son, Tommy, who played professionally, you never knew when a batting practice would break out. So Matt Stairs needed my glove because he didn't have one for a pregame hit where he was playing catch with our bullpen catcher, Bob Stumpo. So I had it I said, "I have mine." And I brought it to the, to the spot. He used it. It sat next to me for that first inning. Actually, it sat next to me for most of the game until I made the catch. Then I put it on my hand. But it was sitting there. And wouldn't you know it, first inning, Freddie Freeman. And I'm looking at this ball as it's hit off the bat. And I'm like, well, there's a pretty good chance this is coming into our area. And the glove wasn't on my hand. It was just sitting at the table. So I'm sitting there calling it and putting it on. And it just happened to be right place, right time. I mean, we could not have ever predicted anything like that. So Tommy had a really good night that night. It's amazing to say that he was playing American Legion baseball at the time, since he just wrapped up playing professionally. And he goes, "Man, I had a really good night." I think he had a home run. He had like 6 RBIs, all this stuff. And I texted him back. I said, "Yeah, that ain't nothing today, buddy." So, yeah, it was pretty cool. So I threw the ball back, and because that's what everybody does at all these ballparks now. And I have nothing left in my shoulder from throwing batting practice for so many years. And it barely got to Ben Revere. They gave it to the ball girl, who then gave it to a young fan who got in touch with me through the folks at WIP, and she got me the ball back. And I made a donation to the American Cancer Society on her behalf. Angelo Cataldi did the same thing. And I just saw her days after the anniversary. She's graduated from Alabama. She's going for her PhD in, I think, biomedicine. It's incredible. She was 12 years old at the time. So, yeah, it was a pretty cool moment.
Listen, I got connections in Hollywood. We should sell this.
It was really cool.
You know what I mean? It's a story with many chapters. You're obviously a major multitasker. You announce the Phils, NFL games, college basketball. How do you do it?
Well, I think you said it at the beginning. I have 4 kids, so there's always something going on at the house, so I have to multitask. I've always done every sport. You know, when I was younger, when I was first starting out, I would buy and sell the time at a local radio station and do high school games. So in order to make ends meet when I was in minor league baseball, I would do football and basketball. And I loved it. I loved doing football and basketball. I love the differences to the sports. I think they all make me, feel better. They make me a better broadcaster. So it was really out of necessity than anything else. But I've always been that way, where I've always tried to do more than, that I'm supposed to do. I used to write for the Trenton Times before I was a broadcaster, and then broadcast the games at the same time. Sometimes it gets tough. I don't have as heavy a schedule as I used to. When I did St. Joe's basketball, when I did CBS basketball, when I did CBS NFL or college football, when I did Westwood One, all in the same year. So it's a little less hectic. And I'll be honest with you, Zoo, I get bored really easy. So there's nobody at home anymore. My wife teaches. My Patrick obviously is married and lives on his own. Tommy lives in North Jersey. Maggie is bought a house with her fiance, and Carrie goes to college. So it's usually me and the dog. And at some point, you stop talking to the dog and you need something else to
do. You mentioned the grind insofar as you working for a station, selling the time so you could broadcast high school sports, writing for the Trenton Times. For the young broadcaster out there, or anybody who's grinding with the hopes of doing something more one day, how does all of that help you to do what you do now?
Well, I've told people that I'm not the person I am or the broadcaster I am without those jobs, because I've built up such a catalog of people that have helped me along the way, whether they realized it or not. It could be Eric Hamilton, who's the former football coach at, now the college in New Jersey, who gave me my first chance to do games, or Jim Gauger, the former editor of the Trenton Times, who used to work for the Philadelphia Bulletin a long time ago, who, when I told him, "Hey, you okay if I broadcast these games while also covering them?" He would just say, and he was really buttoned up, and he would just say, "Yeah, that's fine." So, those things have made me better at what I am because of the people I've met. And then I think about getting the Trenton Thunder job. That changed our lives. I mean, it totally changed our lives, because I was going to go to the winter meetings to get a job. And I know my wife did not want to leave the Trenton area. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this team arrives. And somehow through a lot of good luck, through the fact that, and this is going to sound strange, that I struck up a conversation during the interview process with Joe McDonald, Jody's father, who was a longtime general manager of the Mets and has been in baseball forever. And he liked me. So he told the owners of the Trenton Thunder, he goes, "I like that guy." So I became their PR guy and the media guy for the Thunder, based on my sports writing ability. And of course, my broadcasting was secondary at the time. But all those things have made me better, because I have a real appreciation of the selling of advertising, the running of a game day staff, all those, the grounds crew, everything, because we were in charge of everything in the minor leagues. So I just think it all made me better. I mean, it sort of was the genesis of my work ethic, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Were you an assistant GM in Trenton at one point?
I was. There's this funny story that I had transitioned to being the assistant GM while also broadcasting the games, but I wasn't the lead broadcaster anymore because of my responsibilities as being I always say vice president, because that's essentially what an assistant GM is in minor league baseball. So Andy Freed, who does the Tampa Bay Rays, was my longtime partner in Trenton. We have a lot of guys that went to Trenton that have now gone on to the big leagues. You know, John Sadek, Andy Freed, Josh Mauer. My son Patrick did a couple of games there. It's a really cool place to get things rolling. And so our ownership group had the Trenton Thunder, and then they started the Lakewood Blue Claws. So I had accepted the job as the GM or the president of the Blue Claw. I was going to give up all broadcasting.
Wow.
Because it was a stable job and it was near my hometown of Brick, New Jersey. And I thought it was going to be kind of cool. And I was going basically to sign the contracts for that job. And I called our owner, Joe Finley, who's still the owner of the Thunder with Joe Caruso and Joe Plumeri, and also owns the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. And I said, Joe, I can't do this. Because the night before, I was fixing a toilet at Waterfront Park. For some reason, I fixed this toilet at Waterfront Park. And Zoo, just picture this. I'm like 340 pounds at this time, and I am dripping sweat. And I'm fixing this toilet. And Andy Freed is on the air, and he said, "We go to the top of the fourth inning here at Waterfront Park. Tom McCarthy's supposed to be doing play-by-play, but I have no idea where he is. And I'm sitting on my knees fixing this toilet. I look up at the speaker because you know the speakers are on in the bathroom, and I'm like, that's because I'm fixing a bleeping toilet, Andy." And at that point, I realized, you know what? I don't want to be an administrator. So he was appreciative that I called him and he said, you know, Tom, we want you to pursue this dream. And then a year later, I got the Phillies job in 2001. I mean, it was an amazing bit of good luck. I mean, I've had so much of it in my lifetime.
Well, you say good luck. I always believe you make your own luck. But you just said something about being 340 pounds. Bro, what happened to
man.
that?
Zoo, I mean, I'm like an elevator. Probably the biggest thing I've done in my career is my family. Probably I've accomplished a lot as a broadcaster, but I do not take care of myself the way I should, like you do, and other people. I've for about 10 years, I was over 300 pounds. In fact, last year I was over 300 pounds. I had tipped the scales again. I'm sitting there. I'm doing a CBS game. It's me, Jay Wright, and Bill Raftery. And we're doing the CBS game. And we have the CBS Blazers. Well, that's how I know like where I am weight wise, because I was like Jackie Gleason. I have a line of Blazers in my closet. I have 44 long, 46 long, 48 long, and 50 long. So I'm in a 50 long last year. And I'm sitting there. We're ready to do the open. It was Jay's second game, and he was a little nervous at the time. And the button, I'm like, oh man, this is not going to stay. So we're just about ready to do the open. All of a sudden, the button pops off and goes flying across the arena. And Jay and Bill Raftery lose it at that point. And that's when I realized, man, I gotta start trimming down a little bit. So
Yep, yeah, but you know what? I had that lifestyle, and what happens is you shouldn't eat late at night. And you've just worked. You've been live on the air for 3 hours. It generates a lot of energy. Then you get on the plane, and there's all the food you could possibly eat and more. I mean, right? It's hard, right?
Right. It's hard, But I realized last year I was my heart doctor is in Philadelphia, right by the ballpark, and he just said, "Hey, you got to figure this out." So there's periods in my life where I've had to figure it out. The one time I lost 137. This year I lost 80. So I'm hoping that this is it where I've got to, I keep it down because, we're not getting any younger, obviously. And I feel great though now. I feel great.
Awesome. Keep that elevator down there. Listen,
yeah,
we're gonna talk more about you, your career, your family, but let's talk about the Phils because they're great. One thing I'd like you to do, since you broadcast under both, is Rob Thompson and Charlie Manuel. Manuel, of course, managed the 2008 World Series champs. What do they have in common? And for that matter, what do they do differently, albeit both are successful?
Well, I think the thing that they have in common is that their people skills are unbelievable. I mean, and it's a different way of doing it. Charlie has the good old boy feeling, the West Virginia kind of, attitude. And he just makes you feel like you're part of everything when you walk into the room. And Rob is really that way. I mean, they are players, managers, but they also have their thumb on the scale. Like they know when they have to, they have to buckle it up a little bit in the clubhouse. I just think their people skills are just incredible. We were very fortunate to have Charlie, obviously, and I'm glad everybody gave him a chance, because there was a point where I didn't think they were going to give him a chance. And we are beyond fortunate, particularly after the Gabe Kapler years, to have Rob, because we needed Joe Girardi, I think, as an organization. And I thought he did a really good job of getting us back to the baseball part of it. And then when Joe's time was done, Rob was right there. And I don't know how he didn't get a chance before this. I really don't, because Zoo, he is everything you want as a major league manager. Not only for us as the broadcasters and the members of the media, but just from a player's standpoint. I mean, he and Charlie both have, in different ways, the ability to make everybody feel like they're part of the whole organization. And I think that's not lost on this clubhouse right now.
Does that include the announcers as well? Do you guys
Absolutely.
feel like you're right?
Absolutely.
In what way does he do that?
Well, I mean, he includes us in conversations, not about the team, but he wants to make sure that we understand what's going on behind the scenes. So, not that we have to spill the beans all the time, but we at least have a reason behind it. And he makes us feel like we're part of the organization. It's different than it was when I first started. I mean, when I first started, we truly were part of the organization, and we are, but it's different. I mean, the game's evolved. We're all, I'm 56. These players are 26. So it's a 30-year age gap. Whereas before, when I was 32, when I started, I was younger than many of the players that were on the Thunder. But I think he makes us feel like we're all part of it. And not that we have any hand in the wins and losses, but we do have a hand in telling the story of the wins and losses. And he makes our job a lot easier when it comes to that.
Yeah, and just let me add, because I want to move on from Rob Thompson and talk about Dave Dombrowski, but for a manager to trust you guys, you have to comport yourself in such a way that he feels good about you. So kudos to you. Dave Dombrowski, of course, is the Phil's president of baseball operations. What overriding principles, Tommy, has he followed since taking over 4 years ago?
Well, he must have a plan that's worked with Miami, even worked with Montreal, but worked with Miami and Detroit, that he follows. And there's a great assessment of people in his world, people that he surrounds himself with, and I think that's really important. But he also has an understanding of how to build. So he's got this reputation that he trades a lot of prospects from, when he was at Detroit, when he was with the Marlins before. But he also builds farm systems to then make those trades. So I think he's brought a level of baseball stability, a presence of baseball stability that I don't know if we've had since Ruben and Pat Gillick and those guys. And I think that's really important. I think he steadies the ship. You really never know by looking at him, A, what he's thinking, B, how he's feeling. And I think that if you take that to the athletic fields or the basketball courts or the football fields, that's really important. That that sort of pitcher's face never changes, and I think he's the same way when it comes to that.
Bryce Harper, and let me say that you broadcasted just about every Phillies game this century, with the exception of the 2 years that you went to the Mets. But where does Bryce Harper rank among the Phillies that you've covered to this point?
Well, first of all, he's a tremendous guy. He's very receptive to a lot of the things that we try to do, and if we have questions, they're answered. He is an unbelievable student of this game. Like, he has an idea for everything, and he doesn't share it unless he's part of a conversation. But he's tuned into everything that goes on. To me, he will probably go down as the one or two best players that I've ever broadcast games for. And I say we'll probably go down to it because he's not done. He's got a lot of time left. The Jimmy Rollinses, the Chase Utley, it's hard to replace those guys because they won a world championship, Ryan Howard's. But I think he's starting to slide into that, into that same conversation. I mean, it's pretty special to call his games. And when he's on the verge of a milestone, you better be ready, because more often than not, that milestone, it's going to be a home run or it's going to win a game. And I've never seen anybody, Jimmy was really a player that stepped up in the spotlight, Jimmy Rollins. But this guy, and he hasn't won a world championship yet, but this guy is as much of a guy that can absorb the spotlight as anybody I've ever been around.
Tom McCarthy has mentioned we're going to get more into you, your family, your childhood, how you got into all of this, and what it's like to be you. But first, it is now halftime. And the first part of halftime is the Garage Beer 6-pack of questions. It's brought to you by Garage Beer, beer-flavored beer. Find some near you at drinkgaragebeer.com. I will give you a choice between two things, Tom McCarthy. You just blurt out the answer. Don't think about it. Just blurt. Are you ready?
Yes.
Cheesesteak or soft pretzel?
Cheesesteak.
Center City or South Jersey?
South Jersey.
Gritty or Philly fanatic?
Philly fanatic by a margin.
Duh. Meek Mill or Hall & Oates?
Probably Hall & Oates.
Dr. J or Allen Iverson throwback?
Dr. J, my favorite player.
Oh, wow. Liberty Bell or Rocky Steps?
Rocky Steps.
The 6-pack of questions brought to you by Garage Beer, beer-flavored beer. Find some near you at drinkgaragebeer.com. And now I will look into my music library. I will give you a handful of artists, and you tell me if you have them or not. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
U2.
Yes.
Tim McGraw.
Absolutely.
Tom Petty.
Yes.
Billy Joel.
I've seen him more than any other artist in my lifetime.
Still at the Garden. Lainey Wilson.
Yes, my kids love Lainey Wilson.
So you and I, we can go to concerts, man. I mean,
we could.
We vibed on all 5. I asked you, you told me that Dr. J is your favorite. Now, you grew up in Central Jersey, right? Brick Township, New Jersey. What NBA team were you a fan of at that point?
Well, I rooted for the Sixers, and it was partly because of the '83 championship. I mean, I really liked that team a lot. I love Moses Malone. I love Billy Cunningham. I don't know why. I mean, and I still do. He's incredible. But Dr. J was my guy. I mean, the poster of him going up with the finger roll and the slam dunks. He played for the Nets. My dad, loved the New York teams. So my dad would go see him play for the Nets, and he would tell us all about him. So he was my guy. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. I mean, I grew up in Central Jersey, and the only Philadelphia team that I really cheered for were the Sixers growing up. So, but that was a fun time to see those guys. I used to think about how Moses sweat the whole time, and we didn't have everything that was accessible now. So what we would just see sporadically when games were played. But I used to, when I played high school basketball, I used to think about like the sweat that would drip off Moses' chin when he would be going up and down the floor. So yeah, that team was really good.
Yeah, hardest working man I think that I've ever seen in an NBA game.
Oh, really?
Uniform. Yeah, for sure. Moses, because he was great at rebounding, he was great at so many things, and he was not the world's greatest athlete. So everything he did, one of the great things that he did was he was a tremendous offensive rebounder, but because he didn't jump that much, what he would do is he would literally just continue to tip the ball to himself until he got it to an area where he could finally grab it. And it was just
what a machine.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, with all you do you have any time to watch any Sixers games now?
I do. I mean, obviously, my affinity toward to Allah, so I like to listen to him, and so that's important to me. I don't listen. I don't watch every night. I do listen a lot because I'm in the car often, but I don't watch every night. But I do watch as much as I can. And Joel's an enjoyable guy to watch. I mean, it's a really good team when they're at the highest level.
Allah's my man, and I'm really proud of the fact that Kate Scott has stepped in now that I've left the game. And I have to tell you, I think she's terrific. I just need your take on how long it will take sports fans, because she did have some blowback and and a lot of stuff that she didn't deserve. But the ability now for women to move into our space. There are some Major League Baseball announcers who are women, and NBA, of course. Are you starting to see some sort of a shift where people are being more acceptable?
Oh, I think absolutely.
Or accepting, I should say. I beg your pardon.
I think absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, listen, I did the NCAA tournament this year with Debbie Antonelli and Avery Johnson, and both were fantastic. But it was the first time I worked with Debbie Antonelli. And she's as talented as any male color commentator that I've worked with. Like,
Hmm.
she had everything. She had the rules, which I always think is really important. But she had storytelling ability, things like that. I do think we're at the point where it's more accepting, and I think it has to be, because we're going to see more and more, and I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, I have two daughters. Now, one's a teacher, the other one's probably going to go to law school, and she's interning at the FBI this summer. So
Hmm.
she's a little different, but she's an athlete, and I want them to have the same opportunities that I had in everything that they're doing. So, I think broadcasting wise, for anybody, when they take over for somebody like yourself, and I took over for Harry on TV, it takes time. It
Yeah.
just does. And I knew that when I took over. When David Montgomery asked me to come back from the Mets, I mean, I was a radio guy. I wasn't doing much TV. And I knew I wasn't as worried about taking over for Harry as I was about doing television, because I was a radio guy. And I think for the first couple of years, I was doing radio on TV. I go back and listen now, and I'm like, man, just stop talking so much. And but I do think it just takes time, and I think we're a very accepting city. And the one thing that really stands out about, well, there's a couple things that stand out about Kate. First of all, she's prepared, and I think that's so important. And second of all, she's got amazing energy, and
Hmm.
to have that energy for your team, I think is really important. So I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, I will say that, and I mean this, I've had some really good partners. Chris Wheeler, Gary Matthews, Jamie Moyer, Matt Stairs, Ben Davis, Ruben, Jimmy Rollins at times, Mike Schmidt. But John has enabled me to be, to let it be, it's not about me. It's never been about me. And I don't know if it's about him. It's about the game and appreciation for the game. And I think that's what all my partners have allowed us to do. But I think with John, we've been able to laugh a lot. We've been able to tell some stories. I never know what he's going to say. And the ability to react to that, I think, is important. So I just think it takes time. And I think the biggest thing that I've always told young broadcasters, because I remember when I went to the Mets, I took over for Gary Cohen.
Hmm.
So Howie was the main guy, but I was the number two when I was doing 4 innings of play-by-play. And, they had been used to Gary Cohen and Bob Murphy and Howie Rose. And here comes this other guy from Philadelphia who did grow up a Mets fan, which made it a little easier. But, I never look at it ever as taking over for somebody. I just think that I'm the next guy, and I'm totally different than Harry, what Harry was. And Harry knew that. And he was happy when I came back. He was one of the first people that called me. But I think it just takes time. And I think that's the same thing with women doing play-by-play. I think it just takes time to get used to it. And listen, there's a lot of really talented broadcasters out there. And when you have the ability that they have, the energy, the preparation, I think they're setting more of an example than anybody else.
What you said is absolutely true. It does take time, but I have to think, because really, no matter how good you are, and I think you're great, there's nobody who can replace somebody who is endeared as
Mm-mm.
much as Harry Callis. And so, while you're going through it, what did you learn?
I learned that I can never be somebody that I'm not. That's the biggest thing. I also learned that if you are yourself, whether it be how you deal with people, how you treat people, that still goes a long way, no matter what the situation is. But I also understood that, my preparation, I always felt, was at the top of the top level. And I just think that that's important. And I think that, I think the biggest thing I learned is that it's all going to be all right as long as you don't be somebody that you're not.
Right.
And I always knew that. But now, gosh, I've been back for 17, 16 years. I've been doing it, like you said, for 24, 22 with the Phils. I mean, I'm really comfortable in my skin. And
Hmm.
that took some time. And I do remember, Wheels and Harry, because Harry and I sat at a desk next to each other.
Hmm.
I do remember them saying, and Harry used to say this all the time, just be yourself. Because I think it's harder to me, it's harder to be somebody other than yourself. It takes
Yeah.
way too much work to be somebody other than yourself. When you try to bring somebody else like a totally different personality than who you are in, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. So I think it took me some time to realize that I just had to let it evolve.
By the way, that be yourself advice, I do believe that Red Barber gave that same advice to Vin Scully, and we know how that turned out. But back to John Kruk for a second. Is he the same, I don't know, we'll call it shot in a beer guy off the air that he seems to be on the air?
He's exactly the same guy off the air. I covered that 93 team as a young sports writer, backing up George King for the Trenton Times. And that was a tough clubhouse. So, when we started working together, I kept thinking back to those nights covering the 93 team. And as much as the fans liked them, I didn't think they were the easiest group to be around as a writer. But now, as we sit in this room, because we have a great office at our ballpark, a lot of what you hear on the air comes right from the office. Like it's just a continuation of the conversation in the office. And that's how he is. I watch him deal with people, and he's incredible with young cancer survivors or veterans. It's the same thing with Mike Schmidt. I watch how he deals with people now, and it's incredible to watch how genuine they all are. Larry Anderson's the same way. But yeah, he's basically the same guy. He just doesn't drink the shot or the beer anymore, but he just still has that personality.
You graduated Brick, New Jersey High School. I know that when I was a kid, I would turn the sound down of games and do them into a tape recorder. If memory serves, I think I heard an interview that you did where you weren't that your desire to be a broadcaster came later in life. Am I remembering correctly?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, Zoo, when I was a kid, and I think a lot of kids were this way, I didn't know broadcasters. I mean, that seemed to me to be something on the clouds up above. Like I couldn't reach that. So for me, I grew up, my father worked for the phone company. He went to Seton Hall for night school only a little bit, never graduated. My mom, raised us. I mean, she worked at a ceramic store, but I knew firemen from Jersey City. I knew police officers. I knew accountants. I knew a guy that worked at the phone company. That was my dad. I didn't know broadcasters. So I didn't know that those kind of things were attainable. So I went to college basically to play baseball. That was it. I was a biology major at Trenton State. Everywhere else I applied, I was a totally different major. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was going to CCNJ to play baseball, but I was also going to be a doctor. And that never came to fruition because I was a really bad biology major. But when I got cut from the baseball team my freshman year, I realized that I wanted to stay in sports. So I had a buddy who went to Trenton State College, but also was an editor for a weekly newspaper called the Hopewell Valley News. And he needed somebody to cover some games. And he asked if I could do it. And I was like, yeah, sure. I never wrote. English was my worst subject. So I said, yeah, I could do that. And I literally went and covered a game. I sat down and I was like, well, I don't know how to do this. And I looked at the story that was written the previous week on a baseball game, and I took it and I basically structured my story the same way, used some of the vernacular that that person used. That's how I wrote my first story. And I thought the natural high of writing was just incredible. So I started doing that. I worked for the Trenton Times, and then I did an interview with Mark Narducci. Remember when he used to have the high school segments on Saturday mornings?
Sure, absolutely.
I did an interview with him one time on WIP, and then I guess it was Tom Bigby or somebody said, "Hey, you have a really good voice. You should think about doing this for a living." I was like, "Yeah, okay," and that's basically how I started. Trenton State. I never worked for the radio station at Trenton State College. I got a job at WTTM, the local station, which carried the football games. And I did sports updates for Big Daddy Graham. And he used to call me the sports moron. He had just gotten into sports. He had just got into talk radio. And I'd get up in the morning and I'd do his sports updates. And he'd go, let's go to the sports moron, Tom McCarthy, for more information. And I would do that. And then I started doing these high school games. And that's really how it evolved. And I basically stepped into this world without really being invited. And but I think that's how it was back when I first got going. I mean, we never knew we could do this. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's how fortunate are we? I mean, it just seemed to be an unattainable dream. But
I was just going to say, you're not close to retirement, and I don't pretend to know what your life plan is, but trust me when I tell you, when you look back, you'll do it in disbelief, and you'll say, "Wait, I did what? I did Phillies baseball for how long?
Yep.
I did NFL football, that sort of thing."
Yeah, I think about it now, and I think about all the things that I've done to try to do this, and the people that. So when I was going to go to the winter meetings to do baseball, I hadn't met my wife's family in South Carolina, like some of her other. So we were going down on a visit so I could meet them. We were engaged, and I called the guy that was. And Tom McGinnis did this same thing with this guy. Matt Breen wrote a story about it. I called the guy, Rich Jablonski, who was doing the Charleston Rainbow games. I said, "Hey, listen, I wanted to sit in and see how you do a minor league baseball game. Do you mind if I do that?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." And I was writing a story on one of their players who was from our area. And then he let me do play by play. And I'm sitting there, I mean, who would let somebody who they didn't know do play by play? And I used that tape to get the Thunder job. I mean,
Although I'll say this, with all the baseball you've done, what do you give now to have somebody eat up a few innings? You know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's true. That's true. But it's just funny, some of the things that we've gone through to get to where we are.
Yeah. Speaking of the things that you've done, you filled in for Jim Nantz. I mean, you talk about pinch hitting for Babe Ruth. He's the number one broadcaster of NFL football on CBS. When you got the call to do the highest profile game, are you sitting around saying, "Are you sure you got the right number?" Or are you? I mean, seriously, what was your reaction at the time?
Well, I remember telling my boss from CBS, I basically said, "Get the hell out of here," because during COVID, I was the fill-in for everybody. So I didn't have an NFL game every week. So I had my studio was set up in my basement where I used to do my sports talk show. And if somebody was sick, I would fill in for them from that studio. So I would prepare for all these games. And, it included Jim and Tony's games, but it never happened. Everybody was always healthy, thankfully. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, when everything was sort of back to normal, Jim got COVID. And honestly, I was surprised that somebody else didn't slide up and I didn't slide into, let's say, the number 6 spot, which is where I am now, or the 5th spot. It was an incredible experience. So the producer for his games is one of my old producers, Jim Rickoff. And that made it so much easier that he was there. And Tony was fantastic. Tracy Wolfson was great. I obviously have known them from seminars and things like that, but I had never worked with them. But it was pretty incredible to have that stage, to have that opportunity, and to feel as welcome as I was. And it's why I love working for CBS. I mean, it's an unbelievable place to be. It's kind of like the Phillies in a lot of ways. It's a family, and I've had opportunities to move on to other places for football and basketball, and I have no intention in doing that as long as they'll keep me, because it's a great extra job to have in the off season to work for them.
And by the way, you took the opportunity, and to use the baseball term, you knocked it out of the park.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And just to be clear, your son Tommy still in the minor leagues or no?
No, so he got released during preseason, which was a shame because he had one of his best preseasons. But he's 26, and I think it got to the point where, as strange as it sounds, with some of these leagues, they have a salary cap, and he was an older player, which is amazing for me to think about that. So Tommy's currently broadcasting Trenton Thunder games. And,
wow.
Yeah, and he's only done a handful because he still was trying to play for a little while and had a few phone calls, and nothing ever came of it. I think he would love to keep playing, but I also think he understands that it might be time to move into the next stage of his life. And he sounds great. He was always the one who wanted to do this growing up, and he would be the one who would do the, sit in his room and do play-by-play from the time he was 10 years old. So he's done a handful of games, and he is very good. He did it in college, but he's very good. And I think that the thing about him is that he has the professional player in him that now he's carrying into the broadcast booth. And I think it gives him a great perspective on the game. And whoever will be his partner, if he does choose to do this down the road, they'll be fortunate because he's got so he's a college baseball coach too. So he's going to probably give that up because he wants to, it looks like, pursue this. And he's got another opportunity that's coming up also with Victus, the bat company. And I think that's going to be really good for him too.
And by the way, I've heard Pat on the air with the Mets. He's terrific. And I don't know. Do you hear any of you in him? To me, he sounds like he's, as we talked earlier, is himself, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think there's some cadence, which there will be cadence. I hear it sometimes in certain calls, but I do think he's very much his own person with way better hair than his dad. And I love that. I love how he's evolving. His basketball is unbelievable. He's a former recruited basketball player who played baseball in college, but you can hear his abilities as a basketball player come out in his play-by-play. I always tell him that I wish I had his terminology with basketball the way he does. But I'm really proud of him. I think he's really taken this opportunity. He's run with it, and I think he's continued to evolve. The one thing about Pat, which I hope all young broadcasters can do this, and I know I couldn't always do this. If you give him a suggestion, he'll implement it almost immediately into his play-by-play. And that's really hard to do. And I think that's what really has made him who he is at a very young age.
Tom McCarthy, you're a treasure for us. You've been great. I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you so much for appearing on Fresh 24.
It's my pleasure, Zoo. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of Fresh 24. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our friends over at Philadelphia Sports Nation, a local Philadelphia sports site covering your favorite teams across blogs and social media. PHLSportsNation.com. Philadelphia Sports Nation. PHL Sports Nation. Enhancing your Philadelphia sports fan experience.